Hi everyone, Andrew the Fhiaba guy here, and today I'm going to run through a repair that you may run into in the field where the customer might be calling in to complain about seeing some ice like this forming in the drawer dripping, or that the drawer is difficult to open and close, like it's getting frozen. And if we look, we can see additional water or ice formed on the inside of the drawer. And this is being caused by defrost water not properly draining during a defrost. So that means we've got an ice dam or a blockage in the drain spigot of the evaporator pan, which is in the ceiling of this compartment right here. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this out. We're going to have an inspection, have a look, but what we should discover is that we'll have a layer of clear ice in the bottom of the evaporator pan that is blocked and can't make its way out of the pan down into the drain. So what we're going to do is we're going to use, you need some towels because there's going to be some water when we defrost the ice. Got a little container there to catch the water. I've got my steamer to help hurry the defrost cycle along. All we need is a Phillips power driver to get the evaporator pan off. And I've got a little blanket to protect the floor here because I'm going to take the drawers out and all the frozen goods and put them over here. So let's get started. So the first step is going to be removal of the drawers. And so once these drawers are out for about 3 minutes, so that's just these 2 thumb screws, we're going to start getting door open alarms, which we'll have to handle. But you can see we've got quite a bit of water buildup or ice buildup down here from the defrost, subsequent defrosts, laying down layers of ice because the drain water or the defrost water can't drain out. So we'll take off the top drawer, same deal, 2 thumb screws, and we'll just slide out, place it over to the side here. And then use my secondary camera and we'll get a closer look at what we're dealing with here. So we've got 2 side rails we're going to have to remove just to make it easy on ourselves, because this is the evaporator pan that we're going to remove. We've got 3 screws across the back wall, 3 screws across the front, and this is where the water is coming from. So the water is supposed to drain out back here on that spigot. The evaporator pan basically is slanted in such a way that the water will run out there during defrost. But if it can't get out there, then it starts building up layer after layer until eventually it's coming out the air vents and creating this effect. So I'm going to show you, there's no parts involved in this. It's a field fix, and we'll continue along. So I'm going to get these rails out of the way. So there's 4 screws. When we get the first 3 out, I want to support the rail when we're getting the last screw out so it doesn't simply drop and do any damage or scratching. This one. And this is just going to clear any obstructions out of the way when we drop that pan down and when we do our defrost. So we've got our rails out, and we can now gather up these screws too. Gather up the screws, because as this melts, we don't want to lose our screws. I'll put them aside over here. So now I've heard the door alarm going off, and we've got an alarm light flashing, and that's telling me that the Trimode is open. So that's the Trimode drawer that we just took out. It's open, obviously, so we don't want to hear the alarm beeping anymore, so we're just going to silence it by pushing that button. It doesn't clear the alarm state, but it just makes it so we don't have to listen to the alarm over and over again. But what I'm going to do now is to aid us or assist us in the defrost of the ice. I'm going to put this into a service test mode and go to the step that tests the defrost heater, and that will energize the heater and help melt the ice from the inside, and then from the outside I'll work my way in with the steamer. So we're going to go into, make sure that the display is unlocked. You can test that by pushing the menu button, and the menu button is active, so it's unlocked. And then we're going to put it into the service test mode, or the customized menu mode. So we'll see the menu lights up, customize on the display. I'll press enter to enter into the customized mode, and I don't want to do anything else in here except go to the service test using any of these arrow keys, and I'll press enter. And so now normal function of the appliance is done, and you can see the temperature starting to rise as we've had the door open. Normal operation is done, and it's going to go through the service test, and in order to get to the defrost step, we have to go through each step of the test. It's a linear test, you can't jump around. So we're not going to spend time going through each step or explaining them until we get to the heater, and we're just going to energize it. So we'll just keep pressing enter to cycle through or step through the various test steps. Trimode heater on. So I heard the relay trip on the board, and this is telling me the Trimode heater on, so that's the Trimode drawer down at the bottom. At this point it's going to be energizing that and hopefully helping us melt the ice on the evaporator or in the evaporator pan. So now we can go down, and at this point the fridge is off, so we don't have to worry about it fighting against us and trying to continue to cool. But and one of the great things about these Fhiaba fridges is that they're built by hand, and you've got screws going into metal that you don't have to worry about stripping out as though they were going into plastic. So we'll get rid of these screws, and they're all the same, so we can put them together, which is nice. So now, in order to get the evaporator pan down, you can see like the little spigot in here. We'll just illuminate that with our light. It actually goes into the side wall, so we're gonna have to pull the evaporator pan this direction, and then we'll get a closer look at it. So be careful, because the evaporator and the fan and the sensors and all the wires are also connected to this lower pan. So we want to be careful that we're, if everything's really cold, that we don't crack the suction line. So we're just going to drop that a bit, and sure enough, here we have a nice thick layer of clear ice on the bottom. Using the secondary video, let's take a look at that spigot to see if we can see inside of it. I know that's going to be blurry, but you can see we're blocked with ice there. Let's see if we can get a better view. So we're blocked with ice. So right now, this heater is now energized and starting to defrost the evaporator, and it also runs down through the bottom too, so it'll start defrosting the ice down at the bottom. And while we're in here, we can have a look back here. Can't really see anything. So at this point, I'm going to use the steamer to also help thaw this out. And get it to the point where you can possibly start to physically manipulate it. So here we got some of the ice breaking off, which is helpful if you can take it out in big chunks. But we want to make sure we get it all out, because ultimately we're going to clear out the drain path. That's our air sensor right there. Right now I'm just heating the bottom of the evaporator pan. So of course that's where all the ice is in contact with. And this way I'm not in any danger of hurting the wires or anything like that with the hot steam. There we go, I can see the ice is breaking apart, breaking away from the evaporator. So here you can actually see, as I've pulled the ice away from the bottom of the evaporator, you still got that a layer that's melting away. The defrost heater is actually embedded in that ice. So get some more steam on it. And as things are warming up, you can see everything's getting a little more flexible, a little bit easier to work with. So that's the part that the defrost heater was embedded into. So we're making some progress. Now, this is actually kind of handy because one of the parts of the field fix is disengaging the defrost heater, as you see it is already, from the evaporator, which it normally snaps into, and making sure that it's in contact with this bottom metal pan. So then when it's doing a defrost, we ensure that the pan stays warm, which facilitates or helps prevent an ice buildup or an ice dam on the or in the drain spigot. So the other thing, you can't really take it apart because over here we've got a tie wrap that holds the evaporator in place on this side. So get some more steam in there. So you gotta be careful now, as there's less and less ice in here to absorb the energy of the defrost heater. The heater's actually starting to get a little warm in sections. So you're just gonna watch your fingers in here so you don't get burnt. I show a little tip or a trick. So here you see we've got the fan mount for the Trimode, and what happens sometimes is that the fan will pull off, or if you're replacing the fan, it'll pull off these rubber nipples. And I'm going to show you a little trick for getting these on that I learned from the factory for getting the fan back on a little bit easier. So here you can see the fan motor, and I want to be able to get it back on these rubber nipples, which are really hard to get at from the inside. But what we're going to do is pull them out from the bottom, and then I'm going to put it through the fan this way and then pull the nipples through at the bottom, which will make it a lot easier to get the fan back on. So you got to remove these. Now that it's warmed up inside, shouldn't be a problem to get them out. Right, you just do got to be careful, especially if they're wet. You got to be careful if they're cold because they can get brittle and then break. And these ones are in pretty good shape. Good. So what I'm going to do is pop one in the four corners of the fan. Like that. Ooh. So the defrost heater is on. That's pretty hot. So now we've got all our four nipples in place. When we go to reinstall the evaporator pan, let's make sure I got this fan wire out of the way as well. When we go to reinstall the evaporator pan, we'll be able to secure the fan a lot easier. Let's see how we're doing. Okay, a piece of ice. Seems to be free. There we go. So that appears to be the bulk of the ice. The heater is very hot to the touch. And now the first step of the fix, or the field fix, is that you want to make sure you got the right angle on this spigot. So in some cases the spigot might be level or pointing up a little bit. We want to make sure that it's pointing down so that gravity is our friend. And so what you can do is get a properly sized Allen key like this, put it in, and then kind of crank on it. And what you're going to see is maybe a little bit of a bend. What you want to see is a little bit of a bend in the top. That means you've given it enough of a downspout or a down bend. The other thing we can do is push this down some more so that the heater is in closer proximity to the pan. And we want to ensure that the heater is also in position underneath of this clip at the back. And I'm actually going to bend this heater down so that it remains in good contact with the pan during a defrost. So I'm going to turn it off now so I can handle it without burning myself. In order to turn off the defrost heater, we're going to have to go through all the rest of the steps. Now, when you get to the ice maker cycle, you can't skip it. So it's actually going to go through the entire ice maker cycle, and that may mean dispensing whatever's in the ice tray. Could be ice, could be water. So during this part of the test, it will actually do the test twice. You can see the check arm gets tested, the rotation of the tray gets tested, and then we'll get a message saying ice level low. It means the check arm was able to go all the way down, and then we can go on to the next step. At this point, the heater will be off. So we can get in there. So what I've done is I've stuck the ends of my needle nose pliers. Get some light on there. I'm going to give it a little twist. So when we now put the evaporator back in place, and the evaporator pan back in place, hopefully we'll make decent contact with the evaporator tray, enough so that the drain stays clear. So that should be good. The other thing you want to check while you're in here is make sure on the placement of the evaporator sensor, you want it to be in the upper half. So if it's this thick, you want it to be in the upper half of the evaporator. That way you're not short cycling your defrost. Right, so insert it down enough, but not too far, not too close to the heater. Or else you'll short cycle your defrost. There we go. Run the wire between the fins, give them a little pinch. So now we're going to get that fan motor into place, and you can kind of do this by feel. Once you get one nipple in place, and the rest should be a little bit easier. Here's the fan motor in place. Make sure you don't have any wires caught up in the fan. Everything is tied up nicely, so you're not going to be in contact with the evaporator or the heater on the evaporator. Let's take a look underneath. Here you can see the nipples are pulled through from the back. And then we'll plug the harness back into place. Make sure everything will run. There's two snap clips on either side of the harness. Two snap clips on either side of the harness to make sure they're snapped in, and you should be good to go. So when putting the evaporator and evaporator pan back into place, get that nozzle or spigot in, and you want to push it all the way over against the sidewall. And I usually find it's best to try and put this screw in first at the back wall, and then work your way across. Actually, maybe I'll put one in place to hold the evaporator fan up. Frees up a hand. You can see there's a bit of a gap there in the sidewall, but I'll make sure I get that. Push it over as far towards the wall as I can. And the other screws in place. Make sure you get these overhooks over the end to support the drawer so it doesn't tip out.